Wallet, please. The words weren't polite, more like a growl. Corbin Shaw's granite face never cracked, never showed a damn thing. Except tonight. A flicker, gone too fast to name. He paid, of course. 500 as always. Then gone. But the wallet left right there. Standard procedure? Lock it up. Hand it over. Only inside. Mom. A faded picture of my mom smiling like I'd never seen. 20 years. Gone. Billionaire Shaw knew her? How? He's a monster, they whisper. Cold, ruthless. He thinks I'm just a waitress. Another face in the crowd. He doesn't know I saw that picture. He has no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. This I swear. Wallet, please. The words weren't polite, more like a growl. Corbin Shaw's granite face never cracked, never showed a damn thing. Except tonight. A flicker, gone too fast to name. He paid, of course. 500 as always. Then gone. But the wallet left right there. Standard procedure? Lock it up. Hand it over. Only inside. Mom. A faded picture of my mom, smiling like I'd never seen. 20 years. Gone. Billionaire Shaw knew her? How? He's a monster, they whisper. Cold. Ruthless. He thinks I'm just a waitress. Another face in the crowd. He doesn't know I saw that picture. He has no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. This I swear. The Gilded Sparrow was a world of hushed elegance, tucked away from the clamor of Boston like a priceless jewel hidden in a velvet-lined box. Deals whispered over seared scallops. Secrets exchanged with each sip of vintage Merlot. For Eliza Monroe, the Gilded Sparrow was a cage, albeit a gilded one. She navigated its maze of linen-draped tables and glittering chandeliers, a ghost in a borrowed gown, all to keep a roof over her head and medication in her grandmother's cabinet. Each night blurred into the next, a monotonous ballet of forced smiles and aching feet. But some faces imprinted themselves on the canvas of her memory, none more so than Corbin Shaw. He was a fixture at Table 7, the restaurant's most secluded sanctuary. Twice, sometimes 3 times a week, he would arrive, always alone, a storm cloud in a Brioni suit. The newspapers called him a titan, a tech visionary. Eliza saw only a man carved from shadows, his eyes like chips of glacial ice that seemed to pierce through her, seeing everything, revealing nothing. He never complained, never flattered, never lingered. He simply existed, a silent, imposing presence, and tipped $500, rain or shine. Eliza was his waitress, by unspoken decree. Gerald, the perpetually harried manager, knew better than to assign anyone else to Mr. Shaw. Eliza was efficient, discreet, and, most importantly, didn't simper or pry. She was grateful for the massive tip, a monthly reprieve for her grandmother's expensive medications. She'd take his order, steak, medium rare, still water, serve him with quiet grace and disappear. She wondered sometimes about the man behind the granite mask. Did he have a family, friends, or was his life as stark and solitary as his corner booth? Tonight, however, the atmosphere was different. A nor'easter was battering Boston, turning the city into a swirling vortex of wind and rain. The restaurant was half empty, the usual hum of conversation drowned out by the storm's fury. Mr. Shaw seemed even more withdrawn than usual, his gaze fixed on the rain-streaked window, his $1,000 suit looking like a burden he couldn't wait to shed. He ate his steak in silence, paid the bill with a black, featureless card, and rose to leave, pausing only to acknowledge Peterson, his ever-present, stone-faced butler, waiting near the door. As he shrugged on his overcoat, something slipped from his inner pocket and fell to the plush carpet with a barely audible thud. Shaw, lost in his own world, didn't notice. He swept out into the storm, Peterson in tow. Eliza saw it. Her gaze, trained to notice every detail, caught the subtle movement. A wallet, a dark brown leather wallet, well-worn and obviously expensive. Her initial instinct was to retrieve it and chase after him, but the street was already empty, the black sedan disappearing into the maelstrom. Gerald would insist she lock it in the safe. Protocol. She bent down, her fingers brushing against the soft, worn leather. It felt warm, personal. A spark of curiosity, a rare indulgence, flickered within her. Reckless, unprofessional, she couldn't stop herself. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside were the expected accoutrements of wealth, a collection of platinum credit cards, a driver's license bearing his stern, unsmiling portrait, and a thick wad of crisp $100 bills. But tucked behind the license in a worn plastic sleeve was something unexpected. A photograph, a small, faded square of a woman, her dark auburn hair cascading down her back, laughing into the sun. Wildflowers bloomed behind her, a vibrant tapestry of color. Her smile radiated pure, unadulterated joy. Her eyes, a startling shade of green, crinkled at the corners. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. The clinking of glasses, the soft music, the distant rumble of thunder faded into a muted drone. She knew that smile. She knew those eyes. She had spent countless nights staring at the only other copy of this exact photograph, framed on her bedside table. It was her mother, Liliana Monroe, the woman who had vanished from her life 20 years ago, leaving behind only a handful of photos and a daughter with a heart full of unanswered questions. Her legs buckled. She stumbled, catching herself against a nearby table. Why? How? What was a picture of her long-lost, penniless mother doing in the wallet of Corbin Shaw, the city's most enigmatic billionaire? The question slammed into her with the force of a physical blow. The simple, grueling reality of her life suddenly seemed like a fragile facade, and it was cracking. In her hand, she held proof. Proof of something she didn't understand, a connection both impossible and undeniable. And with that proof came a terrifying realization. The story she had been told about her mother, the story she had built her entire life upon, was a lie. Eliza finished her shift on autopilot, her mind a churning vortex of shock and disbelief. The wallet was locked in the restaurant safe, as required, but the image of the photograph burned behind her eyelids. Sleep offered no escape. Her dreams were haunted by her mother's laughing face morphing into Corbin Shaw's cold, impassive stare. What was he to her? An old friend? A secret lover? The questions gnawed at her, each possibility more absurd than the last. Her mother, as she knew her, was a simple woman. The stories her father, Frank, had told her were of a gentle soul who loved painting and couldn't bake a cake to save her life. They had been poor but happy, living in a small town in upstate New York. Then one day she was gone. A note on the kitchen table, a terse apology, an explanation that she couldn't handle their life anymore. No destination, no explanation. How could that woman, the woman from those simple stories, be connected to a man whose net worth was discussed on global financial forums? By morning, a cold resolve had settled in Eliza's gut. She couldn't live with the not knowing. The fear of what she might discover was immense, but it was eclipsed by the agony of the mystery itself. She had to ask him. She had to look him in the eye and demand answers. She knew his schedule. He would be at Shaw Tower, his corporate headquarters, a gleaming monolith of black glass and steel that pierced the Boston skyline, a fortress inaccessible to the likes of her. But she had an advantage. She had his wallet. Dressed in her most presentable non-waitress clothes, dark jeans and a simple gray sweater, Eliza clutched the leather wallet in her clammy hands and took the subway downtown. Standing before the monolithic tower, she felt a wave of intimidation. Men and women in sharp suits streamed past her, their faces set with purpose. She was utterly out of her element. Taking a deep breath, she approached the imposing marble reception desk. "I need to see Corbin Shaw," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The receptionist, a woman with immaculate hair and a dismissive smile, appraised her with a practiced glance. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's a personal matter. I have something of his." Eliza held up the wallet. The receptionist's expression didn't change. "You can leave it with me. We'll ensure it gets to Mr. Shaw's personal assistant." "No," Eliza said, her grip on the wallet tightening. "I have to give it to him myself. It's important." A standoff ensued. The receptionist was about to summon security when a crisp, authoritative voice cut through the tension. "What seems to be the problem here?" It was Peterson, Mr. Shaw's ever-present butler and head of security. He recognized Eliza instantly, a flicker of surprise in his normally stoic eyes. "This young woman is insisting on seeing Mr. Shaw personally to return his wallet," the receptionist explained, her tone dripping with disdain. Peterson turned his analytical gaze on Eliza, weighing the situation, his eyes lingering on the desperation in hers. "Wait here," he said before disappearing into a private elevator. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Eliza felt the stares of everyone in the lobby. She was an anomaly, a glitch in this perfect, high-powered world. Finally, the elevator doors swished open. Peterson stood there, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Shaw will see you," he said. The elevator ride was silent and swift, ascending to the penthouse floor. The doors opened directly into an office larger than Eliza's entire apartment. One wall was a floor-to-ceiling window offering a godlike view of the city. The furniture was minimalist and modern, the air thick with the scent of old books and money. And there he was. Corbin Shaw stood by the window, his back to her, gazing out over his kingdom. He didn't turn around. "Peterson tells me you found my wallet," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I appreciate your honesty. Leave it on the desk. You can tell my assistant your name and address. I'll have a reward sent for your trouble." His dismissal was so complete, so casual, it ignited a spark of anger in Eliza's fear. "I don't want a reward," she said, her voice trembling but clear. He turned then, his stormy eyes locking onto hers. The intensity of his gaze was staggering. It felt like he was peeling back layers, seeing all her insecurities, all her grief. "What do you want then?" he asked, his tone laced with impatience. This was it. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She took a step forward, placing the wallet on the vast, polished desk that separated them. She opened it, her fingers fumbling with the latch, and pulled out the faded photograph. "I want to know," she whispered, her voice cracking, "why you have a picture of my mother in your wallet." The change in him was instantaneous and terrifying. The air in the room grew cold. The practiced indifference on his face vanished, replaced by a mask of pure glacial fury. His jaw clenched, and a muscle feathered in his cheek. "Where did you get that?" he hissed, his voice dangerously low. "It was in here," Eliza stammered, gesturing to the wallet. "This is Liliana Monroe, my mother. She disappeared 20 years ago, so I'm asking you again. Why do you have her picture?" Corbin Shaw strode around the desk, his presence overwhelming in the suddenly small space. He snatched the photo from her fingers, his eyes blazing. "You have no idea what you're meddling in," he said, his voice a venomous whisper. "You think you've stumbled onto some romantic secret? Some long-lost affair?" He let out a short, bitter laugh devoid of humor. "You know nothing. Your mother was not who you think she was. Now take the wallet, leave this office, and forget you ever saw this. Forget you ever saw me. It's for your own good." He was trying to scare her. He was succeeding. But the image of her mother's smiling face gave her a strength she didn't know she possessed. "No," she said, standing her ground. "I've spent my whole life not knowing. I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth." He stared at her, his eyes searching her face. A flicker of something unreadable, pain, regret, passed through them. For a moment she saw not the ruthless billionaire, but a man haunted by his own ghost. "The truth," Corbin Shaw said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly, yet carrying a weight that chilled her to the bone, "would destroy you." Eliza held his gaze, refusing to be broken by the threat in his words. Her entire life had been shaped by a void, a question mark where a mother should have been. The grief was a familiar ache, a part of her. What could be more destructive than the emptiness she already lived with? "Try me," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Whatever it is, it can't be worse than the not knowing." Corbin watched her for a long moment. The fury in his eyes receded, replaced by a deep, weary resignation, as if he were facing an inevitability he had long sought to avoid. He ran a hand over his face, the gesture shockingly human. He looked for the first time tired. He turned away from her and walked back to the panoramic window, staring down at the city below. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken history. "Your father," he began, his voice distant. "Frank Monroe. He was a mechanic, wasn't he? In a small town called Northwood. Eliza flinched, startled by his knowledge. How do you know that? I know a lot of things, Miss Monroe, he said without turning around. You believe your mother, Liliana, left because she was unhappy with a simple life, because she wanted more. That's the story Frank told you. To protect you. Protect me from what? Corbin finally faced her, his expression grim. From the truth of who she was running from. Your mother wasn't just a small-town girl. That was a role she was playing, a life she desperately wanted, but one she was never truly allowed to have. He gestured to one of the plush leather chairs opposite his desk. Sit down. If you insist on knowing, you might as well be comfortable. Hesitantly, Eliza sat on the edge of the chair. It felt like being summoned to a king's throne room. Corbin remained standing, a predator pacing his cage. Your mother's real name wasn't Liliana Monroe, he stated. The words hung in the air, a foundational crack in Eliza's understanding of her own identity. That was an alias. She was born Liliana Davenport. The name meant nothing to Eliza. Davenport, Corbin clarified, his tone heavy with significance. The Davenports are one of the oldest, wealthiest, and most private families on the East Coast. Their money is generational. Their influence is woven into the very fabric of this country's history, and they are possessive. They control everything and everyone in their orbit. He began to paint a picture for her, his voice low and even, but every word dripped with a chilling reality. Liliana Davenport was born into a world of unimaginable privilege and suffocating control. Her life was mapped out for her from birth, including her education, her friends, and her future husband. She was a beautiful, spirited asset to be managed by her father, the family patriarch, Jedediah Davenport. She was a bird in a gilded cage, Corbin said, his gaze distant, lost in memory. Brilliant, passionate, but suffocating under the weight of her family's expectations. She met your father during a summer when she managed to slip her leash, so to speak. Frank was everything her world wasn't. He was kind, genuine, and saw her, not her family's name. They fell in love, a pure and simple love that was utterly forbidden. He paused, his jaw tightening. When her father found out, he was displeased. He forbade her from ever seeing Frank again. But Liliana had a rebellious streak. She chose love over money. She ran away. She changed her name, erased her past, and built a new life with your father. She became Liliana Monroe. Eliza's mind reeled. Her mother, a runaway heiress. It sounded like something out of a fairy tale. But Corbin Shaw's tone was deadly serious. It explained so much, yet raised 1,000 new questions. So, who were you? Eliza asked, her voice barely a whisper. How do you fit into this? Corbin's expression hardened. The look of old pain returned, sharper this time. I was the man she was supposed to marry. The confession hit Eliza like a physical blow. She stared at him, speechless. Corbin Shaw, the billionaire titan, her mother's fiancé? It was an arranged engagement, a merger of two powerful families, my own and the Davenports, he explained, his voice devoid of emotion. I knew her my whole life. I watched her struggle. When she ran away, her father, Jedediah, was incandescent with rage. He saw it as the ultimate betrayal, a stain on the family's honor. He picked up the photograph from his desk, his thumb gently stroking the edge. He launched a private, silent manhunt to find her, not to bring her home, but to punish her for her defiance. I disagreed with his methods. I tried to find her first, to warn her, to help her stay hidden. So you were trying to protect her? Eliza asked, a flicker of hope in her chest. I tried, he repeated, and the words were heavy with failure. For a few years, she and Frank were safe. They had you. She would send me letters, small updates through a trusted intermediary. This photo was in the last letter she ever sent. She wrote about how happy she was, how much she loved being a mother, a normal mother. He looked directly at Eliza, his eyes holding a profound sadness. Then one day, the letters stopped. My contacts went cold. I knew Jedediah had found her. When I finally tracked down their location in Northwood, the house was empty. The neighbors said Frank had died in a tragic workshop accident, and that Liliana, overcome with grief, had packed up her car and her daughter and left in the middle of the night. "But she didn't take me," Eliza whispered. The old wound of her abandonment tore open anew. "She left me with my father's sister. She just disappeared." "That was the story Jedediah wanted everyone to believe," Corbin said grimly. "The truth is, I don't know what happened after he found them. I don't know if the accident that killed your father was truly an accident. And I don't know where Jedediah took your mother, or if she's even still—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The horrifying possibility hung in the air between them. Her mother might be dead, murdered by her own family. Eliza felt the room spin. The carefully constructed narrative of her life, a mother who left, a father who died of a broken heart, had been a lie, crafted to hide a dark and violent truth. Her mother hadn't abandoned her. She had been taken. Tears streamed down her face, hot and silent. They weren't just tears for the mother she'd lost, but for the parents whose love story had been so brutally destroyed. She looked at Corbin Shaw, no longer seeing a billionaire, but a man chained to the same tragedy. A man who had carried the secret and her mother's photo for 20 long years. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" she sobbed. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Corbin gave a bitter, hollow laugh. "Go to the police with what? A story about one of the most powerful men in the country kidnapping his own daughter? Jedediah Davenport has judges in his pocket and senators on his payroll. His wealth buys silence and creates truth. I had no proof, only suspicions. Accusing him would have been suicide, and worse, it would have put a target on the one thing Liliana had left in this world that mattered." His stormy eyes met hers, and for the first time she understood the look she saw in them at the restaurant. It wasn't indifference, it was vigilance. "It would have put a target," he said softly, "on you." The revelation left Eliza shattered. She left Shaw Tower in a daze, the city lights blurring through her tear-filled eyes. Corbin's final words echoed in her mind. "It would have put a target on you." He had kept this secret, not just out of his own complex loyalty to her mother, but to protect Eliza herself. He had been watching over her from a distance her entire life. The $500 tips weren't just extravagant gestures, they were a lifeline. The job at the Gilded Sparrow, a place she'd gotten through a surprising referral. It hadn't been a coincidence. He had been her silent, unseen guardian, ensuring she stayed afloat while remaining anonymous, hidden from the monstrous shadow of the Davenport family. Returning to her small apartment felt different now. It was no longer just a place of struggle, but a sanctuary that her mother's love and Corbin's vigilance had inadvertently built. Her grief, once a dull, constant ache of abandonment, had sharpened into a hot, fierce anger. Anger at Jedediah Davenport. Anger at a world where money and power could erase people. Corbin had told her to let it go, to accept the safety of her anonymity and live her life. But how could she? Knowing her mother might be alive, a prisoner in a gilded cage, or worse, knowing her father's death might have been murder, felt like a betrayal. Her mind turned to her father, Frank. He had been a quiet, sad man, always tinkering with broken things, as if trying to fix his own broken heart. After he died, her aunt had given her a single, large wooden chest of his belongings. It was mostly old tools, work coveralls, and car manuals. Eliza had kept it, a tangible link to the father she adored. Now she looked at it with new eyes. She dragged the heavy chest from the back of her closet. The smell of oil and old wood filled the room. She had gone through it a dozen times over the years, but now she wasn't just looking at objects. She was searching for clues. She emptied it completely, spreading the contents across her floor. Underneath a false bottom, a detail her grieving teenage self had missed, she found a small, flat metal box. It was locked. Her heart hammered. This was it. This was something her father had hidden. Using a screwdriver from his own tool set, she pried the lock open. Inside, nestled on a bed of yellowed closet. The smell of oil and old wood filled the room. She had gone through it a dozen times over the years, but now she wasn't just looking at objects. She was searching for clues. She emptied it completely, spreading the contents across her floor. Underneath a false bottom, a detail her grieving teenage self had missed, She found a small, flat metal box. It was locked, her heart hammered. This was it. This was something her father had hidden. Using a screwdriver from his own tool set, she pried the lock open. Inside, nestled on a bed of yellowed cotton, were a handful of items: a stack of letters tied with a faded ribbon, a single ornate gold-colored key, and a small folded piece of paper. She unfolded the paper first. It was a note in her mother's elegant looping handwriting, but it wasn't a letter. It was a warning. "My dearest Frank, if you are reading this, they have found us. Do not trust them. Do not believe their promises. Jedediah's reach is long. Remember my stories of the aviary. The peacock sees all. His pride is his weakness. Take our little starling and fly. The key is for the city nest. Everything you need is there. I love you more than all the stars. Yours forever, Lily." Little Starling. That was her father's nickname for her. The city nest, the peacock sees all. It was a cipher, a message of love and fear from the past. And the key, it was shaped like a feather, a peacock feather. Her hands shaking, Eliza untied the ribbon on the letters. They were from her mother to her father, written before she was born. They were love letters full of hope and plans for their future. But a thread of fear ran through them. She mentioned my father's sigil, the peacock, a symbol of the Davenport family's ostentatious pride. "The peacock's eyes are everywhere," she wrote in one. This was it, proof. This was what Corbin Shaw lacked. But what was the city nest? She scanned the letters again. In one, her mother mentioned a dream of having a small art studio in Boston, a place to escape a nest just for them. She mentioned a street name, Winslow Place, and a building she admired. It was a long shot, a 20-year-old dream, but it was all she had. The next day, Eliza took the key and the note and went to Winslow Place. It was a quiet, historic street, much like the one the Gilded Sparrow was on. And there it was, a handsome brick building with a discreet sign, Winslow Place Storage. It offered private long-term storage units, the kind wealthy city dwellers used for art, wine, or furniture. Her heart pounding, she approached the front desk, managed by a sleepy-eyed Clear. "I'm not sure if this is right," she began, her voice unsteady. "I'm looking for a unit rented by Liliana or Frank Monroe, or maybe Davenport. It would have been about 20 years ago." The Clear typed sluggishly into his computer. "Nothing under Monroe or Davenport." He looked bored. Eliza's shoulders slumped. It was a dead end. Then she remembered the note. His pride is his weakness. What if the unit wasn't under her name? What if her mother, in an act of bitter irony, had used her father's name? "Could you please check one more name?" she asked. "Jedidiah Davenport." The Clear typed again. His eyebrows shot up. "Well, what do you know? Unit 312, rented 22 years ago, paid in full for 50 years. Seems you're the first person to ever ask about it." It took every ounce of her self-control not to gasp. Her mother had hidden her escape hatch right under her father's nose using his own name, banking on the fact that his monumental pride would never allow him to imagine his daughter would use his identity in such a common, pedestrian way. "I have the key," Eliza said, holding up the ornate peacock feather key. The clerk shrugged and pointed her down a long, dimly lit corridor, 3rd floor, room 12. The corridor was silent and cool. The air was still. She found the door marked 312 and slid the strange feather-shaped key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click. With a deep breath, she pulled open the heavy door. It wasn't a storage unit filled with dusty furniture. It was a room frozen in time, a small artist's studio. An easel stood in the center, holding an unfinished painting of a field of wildflowers. Canvases were stacked against the wall, filled with vibrant, joyful paintings, a stark contrast to the dark secret of their creator's life. A small desk sat in the corner. On the desk was a leather-bound journal. With trembling fingers, Eliza opened it. It was her mother's diary. Page after page was filled with her elegant script detailing her escape, her love for Frank, her joy at discovering she was pregnant, and her ever-present gnawing fear of being found. She wrote about Corbin, the boy she grew up with, the fiancé she never loved but cared for as a friend. She documented her attempts to contact him to let him know she was safe, and then the final entries. Her tone shifted from fear to sheer terror. October 12th. A man was in town today. He wore a suit that cost more than our house. He was asking questions. I saw the glint of a lapel pin. A peacock. Jedediah has found us. October 14th. Frank is scared. He wants to run again. Take Eliza and disappear to Canada. I told him we must. We are packing tonight. The man was back. He watched the house from his car all day. October 15th. It's too late. They came. Not Jedi. A man named Peterson. He works for Corbin. But he wasn't here to help. He said Corbin sent him to make a deal to bring me home. I don't believe him. Corbin would have come himself. Eliza's blood ran cold. Peterson and Corbin Shaw's butler, the man who had led her to his office. According to this, he wasn't a savior. He was a harbinger. She flipped to the last frantic entry. The handwriting was messy, blotted with what could have been tears. October 16th. Frank is dead. They said it was an accident in the shop, a faulty lift. I know they killed him. Jedediah's men are here. They are taking me. They say if I come quietly, they will let my little starling live. They will let Frank's sister raise her. It is no choice at all. They are letting me write this one last page. They say someone will find it one day. A warning, they call it. A testament to the power of the Davenport family. My name is Liliana Davenport, and my father has murdered my husband and stolen my life. Do not look for me. Live. Just live, my sweet Eliza. Below the entry was a name, not her mother's. It was a signature of the man who had overseen this final cruel act. The man who had handed her the pen, witnessed by A. Peterson. The journal slipped from Eliza's fingers. The entire narrative had shifted again. Corbin Shaw wasn't her mother's failed protector. He was her betrayer. He had sent his man to drag her back to her father. He was complicit in the destruction of her family, the kindness, the protection, the money. It wasn't guardianship, it was guilt, a 20-year payment on a debt of blood and betrayal, and the man who had enacted it. All the stony-faced butler was still by his side. Rage was a fire in Eliza's veins, burning away the shock and grief. The man she had started to see as a complex, tragic figure was a monster hiding behind a facade of wealth and regret. Peterson, the silent figure in the background, was his accomplice. The diary was undeniable proof. She didn't storm back to Shore Tower. A direct confrontation with Corbin would be pointless. He was a master of control and deflection. She needed to break through his defenses, and the weak point, the one who had signed his name to her mother's last testament, was Peterson. She knew where to find him. Every evening at 7:00 p.m., while Corbin had his solitary dinner at the Gilded Sparrow, Peterson would wait in the black sedan parked in the alley behind the restaurant. He was a man of rigid routine. That night, Eliza didn't go into the restaurant for her shift. She called in sick. Instead, she waited in the shadows of the alley, her mother's diary clutched in her bag, its weight both a burden and a weapon. Right on schedule, the sleek black car pulled into the alley. Peterson got out, his posture ramrod straight, and stood by the vehicle, his gaze fixed on the restaurant's back door. Eliza stepped out of the shadows. Mr. Peterson. He turned his face, betraying no surprise, only a weary recognition. It was as if he had been expecting this moment for 20 years. Miss Monroe, he said, his voice a low, growly monotone. You should not be here. I think I should, she said, her voice shaking with suppressed fury. She walked closer, stopping a few feet from him. I found my mother's studio, and I found her diary. She saw a flicker in his stoic facade, a barely perceptible tightening around his eyes. I read her last entry. Eliza continued, her voice rising. The one you so kindly witnessed. The one where she says you came to her claiming Corbin sent you to make a deal. The one where she accuses my grandfather of murdering my father. She pulled the diary from her bag and held it up. Your name is right here, Mr. Peterson, a Pedersonen. What does the A stand for, Arthur Andrew? Does it matter you stood there and watched as they destroyed her? You were his tool. Peterson looked from the diary to her face, a face so much like Liliana's. The years seemed to fall away from him, leaving behind a man burdened by an old heavy guilt. My name is Anthony, he said, his voice raspy with disuse. And you are right, I was there. The simple confession stunned Eliza into a moment of silence. She had expected denial's threats. Not this. Mr. Shore did not send me to bring her back. Peterson continued, his gaze dropping to the grimy cobblestones. He sent me with money, new identities, and a plan to get the three of you out of the country. He knew Jedediah was closing in. I was supposed to be your salvation. What? Eliza stammered. The diary my mother wrote. What she believed to be true. Peterson interrupted, his voice filled with a profound sadness. Jedediah's men got there first. They intercepted me before I could reach the house. They took the resources Mr. Shaw had given me, and they used them against her. They used my presence, my connection to Mr. Shaw, to spin a story of betrayal. They told her Mr. Shaw had given up on her, that he had allied with her father and sent me to retrieve her. It was a psychological masterstroke of cruelty designed to break her spirit completely before they took her. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. They were filled with a shame so deep it seemed to have settled into his bones. They murdered Frank Monroe. They staged it as an accident. Then they walked me into that house and forced me to stand there as they presented Liliana with their ultimatum, her life of silent servitude in exchange for yours. They made me watch as they fed her the lie that the man she trusted, Mr. Shaw, had betrayed her, and they made me sign my name as a witness. It was Jedediah's message to Mr. Shore, a message that he had failed, that his power was nothing compared to the Davenports, and that I, his most trusted man, was now party to his defeat. The story was so horrific, so diabolical, that Eliza felt sick. The cruelty wasn't just in the act itself, but in the meticulous, psychological torture they had inflicted on her mother. Why have you stayed with him? Eliza whispered. After all this, after they used you like that. Loyalty, Peterson said simply, and atonement. When I returned and told Mr. Shaw what had happened, I saw him break for the first and only time in my life. He blamed himself. He felt he had moved too slowly, that he had underestimated Jedediah's ruthlessness. That night he made a vow. He would become more powerful, more untouchable than Jedediah Davenport himself. He would build an empire so vast that one day he would have the strength to protect what was left of Liliana's legacy, and to challenge the man who had taken her. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Every major decision Mr. Shaw has made for the past 20 years, every acquisition, every investment, every risk has been a step toward that goal. He amassed his fortune not for the sake of wealth, but for the sake of building a weapon. The money he gave you through tips, the job he arranged for you. It was his way of keeping his promise to Liliana, of tending to her little starling from afar. He lives with the knowledge that the woman he loved believes he betrayed her. That photograph in his wallet is his penance, a daily reminder of his failure and his vow. Tears were streaming down Eliza's face again, but this time they were different. They were tears of profound, soul-shaking sorrow for everyone caught in Jedediah Davenport's web. For her murdered father, for her imprisoned mother, and unexpectedly for the two men standing in this dark alley, the billionaire and his butler, both trapped in their own prison of guilt and duty for 2 decades. Is my mother still alive? Eliza asked the question, a fragile prayer. Peterson's face was grim. We believe so. Our sources are limited, and Jedediah's compound is impenetrable. But the word is she lives at the Davenport estate, a beautiful ghost in a house of sorrows. Never seen, never heard from, but alive. Eliza looked from Petersonen to the back door of the restaurant, where inside Corbin Shaw sat alone at his table, a king on a throne of secrets and pain. The truth was finally clear, more terrible and more tragic than she could ever have conceived. And with that clarity came a new unshakable resolve. Her mother had told her to live, but living wasn't enough. Not anymore. Armed with the full devastating truth, Eliza felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. The chaos of emotions had crystallized into a single sharp point of purpose. She walked back to her apartment not as a victim of circumstance, but as the daughter of Liliana and Frank Monroe. She was their legacy, and she would not let their story end in tragedy and silence. The next day she didn't go to Shore Tower. She went to the Gilded Sparrow, but not for her shift. She walked in during the afternoon lull, dressed simply, and asked the manager, Gerald, if she could leave a note for Mr. sure to be delivered with his dinner. Gerald, aware of her recent illness and the strange events, simply nodded and handed her a piece of the restaurant's heavy cream-colored stationery. She wrote only 7 words. The Starling is ready to fly. She knew Corbin and Peterson would understand. It was a declaration, an acceptance of her identity, and a signal that she was done hiding. That evening, instead of Corbin Shaw's black sedan, a different, more discreet car was waiting for her outside her apartment building. Peterson was at the wheel. He opened the back door for her without a word. The drive was silent. They didn't go to Short Tower or a fancy restaurant. They drove to a private airfield outside the city limits. On the tarmac, bathed in the glow of the runway lights, sat a sleek private jet. Corbin Shaw was waiting for her at the base of the stairs, not in a suit, but in casual trousers and a dark cashmere sweater. The wind whipped at his hair, and in the stark lighting, he looked less like a corporate titan and more like a weary general on the eve of a great battle. I received your note, he said as she approached. I had hoped this day would never come, that he would choose a life of peace. There is no peace in knowing my mother is a prisoner and my father's murderers walk free, Eliza replied, her voice steady. You spent 20 years building a weapon. I want to know if you're ready to use it. A slow, grim smile touched Corbin's lips. It didn't reach his eyes. Jedediah Davenport is an old dragon sitting on a mountain of secrets. To challenge him directly is to invite destruction. He's insulated by layers of wealth, loyalty, and political power. A direct assault is impossible. So what do we do? Nothing, Eliza asked, her frustration rising. I didn't say we do nothing, Corbin said, his stormy eyes gleaming with a strategic fire she'd never seen before. We don't attack the dragon head-on. We pull the mountain out from under him. He led her onto the jet. The interior was a state-of-the-art command center filled with screens and communication equipment. Peterson was already inside setting up a secure satellite link. For 20 years, Corbin began, his voice low and intense. I haven't just been making money. I've been gathering information. Jedediah's empire, like all old empires, is built on a rotten foundation. Shady deals, political corruption, blackmail, hidden accounts. He's meticulous, but no one is perfect. I have been searching for the one crack, the one loose thread that if pulled could unravel everything. He gestured to a large screen. A complex web of names, companies, and financial transactions appeared. At the very center was the name Jedediah Davenport. A few months ago I found it. Corbin said, a massive illegal transfer of funds made 30 years ago. It was used to bribe a federal judge to kill an antitrust investigation into Davenport Industries. It was the crime that solidified his empire's dominance. The proof is buried deep in a defunct Swiss bank under a labyrinth of shell corporations. But I found the key, the account number. Why haven't you used it? Eliza asked. Because the proof is digital encrypted. To get it, I need access to the bank's central server. And even if I got it releasing, it would trigger a war. The people implicated alongside Jedediah are still powerful. The fallout would be immense. It was a nuclear option, one I was hesitant to use because of the collateral damage and the risk it would pose to you. He looked at her, his expression deadly serious. But your note changed my mind. You are no longer hiding. The truth, whether we like it or not, is over. The moment Jedediah learns you know the truth, and he will, you will become his primary target. Our only move is to strike first and strike so decisively that he has no power left to retaliate. What's the plan? Eliza asked, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. The bank's headquarters are in Zurich. Their servers are a fortress. Peter Sonnen interjected, his voice crisp. Physical access is impossible, but not digital, Corbin countered. I've been cultivating an asset for 5 years, a senior systems architect at the bank. He has his own grievances with his employers. He's in position. He can create a window for us, a 60-second window to breach their firewall and extract the data. But it has to be done from a specific network node located in London. We're flying there now. Eliza stared at him, stunned by the scale of the operation, the years of patient, meticulous planning. It was a high-stakes game of corporate espionage and digital warfare, all orchestrated by this one man, fueled by a promise made 2 decades ago. What about my mother? She asked, her voice soft. Even if you ruin him, he'll still have her. That's the second phase of the plan, Corbin said, his face grim. While the world is reacting to the data leak, while Jedediah's allies are scrambling to save themselves, and his empire is collapsing, his attention will be divided. His security will be focused on the external threat. That's when Peterson will lead a small, specialized team to the Davenport estate. It's a rescue operation. High risk, no guarantees. He looked directly into Eliza's eyes. This is my gambit. I am putting my entire fortune, my company, and my freedom on the line. Once we do this, there is no going back. You need to be sure. This is your war as much as it is mine. Eliza thought of her mother's face in the photograph, her father's quiet sadness, the diary filled with love and terror. She thought of her own life, lived in the shadow of a secret she never understood. There was no choice. There never had been. I'm sure, she said, her voice ringing with conviction in the quiet cabin of the jet. Let's go bring my mother home. Corbin nodded once, a look of grim resolve on his face. He turned to Peterson. Tell our asset in Zurich the game is on, and get the extraction team ready. As the jet's engines roared to life, lifting them into the dark sky, Eliza looked out the window at the receding lights of Boston. She was leaving behind her life as a waitress, as a quiet, grieving girl. She was flying toward an uncertain future, toward a confrontation with a monster. She was no longer just a starling. She was the daughter of a lioness, and she was about to learn how to roar. Eliza's journey, born from a forgotten wallet, had led her to the precipice of a war she never knew was being waged for her. The truth didn't just leave her in tears. It forged her grief into a weapon, her sorrow into strength. She was no longer just a waitress haunted by the past, but a key player in a daring gambit to reclaim a life that was stolen, to free a mother she barely remembered, and to avenge a father she would never forget. The story of Corbin Shaw's 20-year vow and Liliana's tragic sacrifice was about to reach its explosive climax. What happens next? Does their high-stakes plan succeed? Can they truly topple an empire and rescue Liliana from the dragon's lair? The battle has just begun. If this story of secret sacrifice and the unbreakable bond between a mother and daughter moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a story of justice and resilience. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the thrilling conclusion to Eliza's fight for her family. Your support helps us bring more incredible stories like this to you. Thank you for listening.